operational areas, and that's the way we do it at Cemtech, gradually zoning into the cement manufacturing process and some more traditional topics as well. But first, we're going to hear a presentation with a very bold title. I'm very pleased that Amr Nader, CEO of A³&Co, will be here to talk about the global cement decarbonisation, and he'll be the mythbuster. So we've got a very interesting topic, another perspective on everything that we've been talking about today. Amr holds a degree in chemical engineering and a PG degree in digital business from MIT Executive Education and Columbia Business School. He has a record of 20 plus years working within the built environment with cement executive teams and business leaders in 50 different countries, including Lafarge in the Middle East, Africa, South and East Europe, Orascom in the UAE and Pakistan, ASEC in Egypt, with smart specialized services in Jordan, Oman, Saudi, Egypt and Iraq, and more recently Yanbu Cement in Saudi Arabia. Amr now holds the position of CEO of A³&Co. Welcome to the stage, Amr.
Hello. Good afternoon, everyone, and thanks for Cemtech and for Thomas for this great honor. And it's very hard to talk about decarbonization after the great presentations we had in the morning. And unfortunately, I'm gonna give a bit of a controversial approach, and I hope you bear with me till the end. I will try as much as possible to get an agreement at the end of my presentation. So simply speaking, we are a consultant in the built environment. We have been in the market for around 5 years. We are handling around 30 million tons of CO2 in different countries of the world. We, as you could see, an SBTi company, so we walk the talk. We are also part of United Nations Global Compact, and here is the perspective I want to give. Since the morning, we have been discussing cement from an inside-out approach. It's how we look about our sector. I will try to give the perspective of how we are seeing from outside. I just came last week from the UN General Assembly. We are, as you could see on that small badge here, we are part of the companies recognized as fast-forward companies by the UN, which are the companies that are doing a sufficient recognizable effort to decarbonize their sector. So we have done hard, as Thomas was saying, we worked hard to earn it. So this is a perspective I want to convey today, and it's gonna be a bit different from what we discussed. So I will take you through, first of all, a global industry overview with numbers to see the whole globe from an impact of CO2 from cement industry on population. And then we'll go for some methods, not all the methods, I'll just mention two, just to show that there is a lot of things that we believe that they are a given fact, which they are not. And then I will go with a bit of focus on the MENA region, just to show activities outside of Europe, and then I will close with a conclusion and a call for action. So, by numbers, this is CO2 per capita of the world. So if you could see in a arranged manner, in an arranged order, the lowest is Africa, the highest is Asia, and between them we have South America, North America, and Europe. So by numbers, the total of what is called generally the global north is equal to what is called generally the global south, which is Africa, South America, and Australia, and lies in between Asia, which has its own different dynamics. Because in any statistics that we make, we put China and India outside of the equation because they contain half of the planet. So we put them outside. So Asia is usually an uncomparative. It has its own dynamics. So if we looked at the half of the rest of the world, you will find that the global north and global south are equal from an impact. If you looked at it from a per capita perspective, while Africa is one of the biggest producers of cement, they have the lowest impact per capita. This could be argued by the number of inhabitants, which is 1.5 billion, but I've put the absolute number. You would see that the absolute number is still very close to North America and even lower than Europe. This I will give a feedback on why this is like that going forward in the presentation. But the main idea here is the global north is not lower in carbon intensity compared to the global south. This is a myth, and it's a wrong myth. The reality is the global south is equal in carbon intensity in the cement industry to the global north. That is a fact on the numbers available today. So, one of the myths is global north is leading in cement decarbonization. Reality is the global north, particularly Europe, is investing in advanced technology, of course, like carbon capture. But the high costs, scalability issues, which makes a lot of significant challenges. We have spent the first half of the day discussing the complexities of CCUS. I agree, and I fully understand, and I fully grasp the fact that CCUS is the only way to achieve net zero. But we need to achieve the near term before net zero. We need to achieve 2030 below 2 degrees before the net zero. If we don't achieve that, there will be no net zero. All of the models will change drastically after 2030 if we do not achieve the 2 degrees. The point is, spending that much money and effort on CCUS, which I'm not against, it's great to do. We need it for the future. But we need to handle the present before we move to the future, or there will be no future. So the reality fact is, according to the recent global stocktake, last COP, all the world is behind on all aspects, cement and others. So the fact is, we are behind. Despite the, I would say, glamorous pictures that we painted in the morning, yes, we are doing efforts, yes, we are improving, but no, we are behind the target. And this is a game that has no draw score for it. It's win or dead. We have to achieve the target, not get close to the target. If we do not achieve the models of 1.5 or 2 degrees at max, we will have a completely different model after 2030. So the fact is, the global stocktake said we are behind. The second fact is, since the implementation of CBAM 2 years ago, the inflow of cement and clinker to Europe has been more than 10 million tons coming from where? North Africa. Why? Because, of course, cheaper cost, and because CO2 is almost at bar. Because if CO2 is higher, then the CBAM impact would make this clinker and cement. On the next slide, you will find more details on this fact. The other fact is, on the global south, yes, they are not working on sophisticated technologies like CCUS, but they are working on solutions that are adaptable to the local and the context of the economy there. So, for example, countries like Saudi Arabia, they have natural pozzolan. They do not need to work on GGBFS. I will talk about GGBFS separately, but they do not need it. They have their own SEM. Saudi Arabia has been 74% clinker substitution since 1998. Not because of decarbonization, but because of the local context makes sense. Same applies to many other countries. For example, Uganda. I commissioned one of the two biggest lines in Uganda in 2006. It was working 50% alternative fuel from day one. Why? Because they don't have access to coal. It's the only way to do it, alternative fuel. So it's not only decarbonization driven, it's natural, organic growth of the industry. And we need to focus on this approach that is positive on the P&L of the cement sector to be able to achieve the 2030 near-term targets. And hence, SBTI is a very important approach. I will come to that in the next slide. So the fact is, most of the cement plants in the global south, which are newer than the plants in the global north, are of lower intensity by design. If we compare Cemex, for example, Cemex UK versus Cemex Egypt, both are using alternative fuels very high, but the intensity of the Rugby plant is double the intensity of the Egyptian plant. This one is a semi-wet plant in Rugby, and this one is an inline calciner plant. So if both use 60% alternative fuel, this one has a lower carbon, no questions asked. So instead of spending 500 million on the Rugby plant to make a CCUS, let's spend 150 million and make it ILC, like the Egyptian plant. It makes sense from a P&L perspective. So simply speaking, we have to focus on what's doable today with what we have today to be able to achieve the near-term targets, because if we don't, there will be no long-term targets. This is a detail, I'm keeping that for only reference. You will all receive the presentation. This is a detail of why the inflow of cement and clinker was beyond 10 million tons in the past 2 years since the CBAM is implemented. The sources are there. Sources are mainly World Cement Association and World Economic Forum. You can review that. These are facts. So that takes us to why are we discussing CCUS that much, and why is there, if this is so obvious and is being done in other countries, why are we discussing different approaches that much? My opinion, and this is my only my humble opinion, why do we have this diverse approach into decarbonization? Since, I would say, Paris Convention, but more obvious since Glasgow, there was three main streams that was developed within the decarbonization for the cement sector. One is the easy one, the political side. The political side is very simple narrative. We capture the carbon, we store the carbon. And this has its own economical element because it's the only way that oil companies stay relevant in the future. We are using the depleted oil wells. I will not dwell a lot into that, but I would say that I have heard and seen in some high-level meetings where oil companies are saying that the right place of a cement plant is near a depleted oil well, not near a limestone quarry, which is, I don't know how did they get the nerve to say that. And now there is even a new narrative. What's being said is that the integrity of the old oil wells from a structural perspective is not sufficient to hold the CO2. So cement and steel plants or industrial emitter clusters will need to drill their own wells to have sufficient, which is way beyond expectation. I cannot see any feasibility that will bring that unless we are only working to keep the oil and gas industry in business. So this is the political side. There is no way that this approach will achieve near term. There is no way, because all the projects that we have discussed today in the morning, best case scenario will be in operation 2029, if they got in operation. So 2030 is out of the question. Then net zero, yes, we'll see. I'm 100% sure that CCUS, oxyfuels, will be the way to capture the remaining residual CO2 of our industry. I fully understand that. But this is 12 to 15, 20% max of our emissions. The 80% are done on things that we can do now. The second perspective is the natural or synthetic replacement. This is a dreamy side, which we are trying to replace a 4.2 billion ton production per year of a material that is the second used on Earth after water by new material. I'm not against innovation, but good luck with that. I doubt it will happen in our lifetime. The realistic part, which is a hard one, which is the one I'm advocating for, is industrial and realistic. This one, we can definitely achieve near term, proven by science, proven by practical solutions, and proven by numbers. This is what I will show in the next slides. And we will achieve a residual of below 15%. These are scientific proven numbers with technologies that are of TRL above 9. They are within the capex threshold of cement plants. They are doable. They are achievable today. So what's happening on the global south, specifically on the MENA, so we get a view of what's happening outside, more of a global view as we are saying. So simply speaking, this is a trend which shows where countries are from the different emissions levels based on their indices, and this is based on the old indices. The new indices that will come in the next COP are even more advanced to that. So you will see, for example, a country like UAE is adopting for the cement sector a reduction of around 32% by 2030, which is exactly the number of SBTI. They are not saying they are adopting SBTI for political reasons, but they are taking the curve as a guidance. So you would see that in this country's list, there is global south and global north well spread in between them. Of course, UK is way up at the top as the most advanced country from a climate perspective, but there is still other companies that are in a good level below. The point here is 60% of the MENA emissions and GDP have net zero pledges. So actually net zero is being pledged in MENA, regardless of the mechanisms being put, and this can be discussed both on global north and global south. The next point here is, these details are for reference, you can discuss it, but the main problem is here. Within the MENA region, only 46% of the businesses have ESG reports, and hence, with all due respect to the groups and their sustainability reports, as long as there is no standard for calculation, I'm sorry, this is their numbers. And sustainability reports are not sufficient and have been proven in many cases not true from a number perspective. If you remember my first slide, if you counted the numbers over there, it will give you around 1.8 billion tons of CO2. The actual accounted number globally is 2.8. So between the numbers from the same agencies, if you use different sources of the number, you can find the 30% error. Numbers are not true because we do not have a standard for calculation. Everybody calculates on his own. So this is a representation of the Middle East with sizes of production and amount of absolute cement CO2 emissions. Again, this slide is going to be shared. You can use it to calculate the numbers and see the differences. And you will find some amazing numbers that the 650 is doable and achievable in many countries. It's not a big deal, if you are using the things that can be done today. Point is, we spend a lot of time trying to find legislation to make the political stream works, where we have produced the SOx and NOx problem we had in the 1990s. We produced a law that went on all IPs in 2 years. SOx is a gas, NOx is a gas, CO2 is a gas. We can't put a limit and make a standard. Regardless of why and why not, of how complicated, which I doubt, truly is, the number is calculatable, the limit is known, and we know that 450 is the number that takes us to near term, and we can easily mandate it. Then we find a way to either incentivize or tax or penalize. That's a different story. But at least first have a model that we know our actual numbers. CCUS being discussed as a solution. CCUS has started in oil industry in 1950s. Since then, till date, the total volume of CCUS in oil industry is 50 million tons of CO2. We want to scale that in 7 years to 3.2 billion tons. This is impossible. Impossible. By 2050, maybe, yes. And we don't need 3.2 billion. We actually need 0.6 billion, which is more doable, more scalable, and more achievable. So, does the cement industry have a solution? Yes, they do. Those are the levers that are easy, known, RTL high, and being discussed. It was discussed in the morning, for example, the first thing that was discussed was alternative fuels and thermal energy. Don't tell me a plant is getting 80% alternative fuel, but oh, sorry, its specific heat consumption is increasing. That means its carbon did not decrease. At the end of the day, the intensity of the energy utilization did not reduce. So if I'm going to increase the alternative fuel, I have to do it at low specific heat consumption. If I don't do it, I'm not reducing carbon. It's not only about a percentage tick mark. So those levers, the traditional levers, which have been worked since World Bank Sustainable Initiative 1998 and have been adopted, we have moved from 0% to 35% after the WBSD on alternative fuel in 8 years. Since those 8 years till today, according to the numbers we have seen in the morning, we have only moved from 35% to 52%. So in 8 years, we have moved triple what we have moved in 2 decades. And landfills and alternative fuels are not only a solution for CO2, it's a solution for methane, as well as landfills and circular economy. So these are the levels. I will not dwell on details. I can see Thomas is going to show me the plot very soon. So the main point is the post-2030 solutions are not things that I'm against. I'm not saying they are important. They are very important. But we need to finish those to make those relative. And this is a proven approach. We know the exact cost. We are talking about less than $10, not 220 euros per ton. We are talking about less than $10 per ton of investment for the next 6 years to achieve the near-term target. And this is what matters now. Finally, this is how we do it. I will not also dwell on that. This is my most important slide, and this is what I hope that if any of what I've said has made sense, to just have a moment and try to grasp this. We simply need to produce a global carbon standard, so our numbers are reference. Whatever CRH calculates is comparable to whatever Heidelberg calculates, is comparable to whatever anybody else calculates. Second is SBTi adoption. We have a standard, we have a curve, we have a directive, and it makes huge scientific sense. If it's not that good, let's adopt it and upgrade it. But it is at least a very good start that we all align to this, and it takes us to the new term. Third is focus on near term than net zero. And Cemtech was talking in the morning. After the World Bank Sustainable Initiative, Cemtech produced what's called the BAT in the cement industry. This document goes back to, I think, 2001 or 2000. The BAT is there. And when, as governments, for example, I will take again the UK plant, one of the most advanced climate countries, Rugby plant. It's a semi-wet plant. And instead of investment on CCUS, move it from semi-wet to the BAT. First, if you have a Volkswagen and I have a Tesla and we are racing into decarbonization, don't put a CCUS for your Volkswagen, buy a Tesla first. So this is straightforward, simple, and direct, and within our RTLs, and with very valid feedbacks and ROIs. Finally, we cannot keep pushing for producing green material if we don't have public green procurement policies. The UN procurement policy is not green. They do not put CO2 and the sustainability index at the top of the procurement weighing in the tenders. So if we don't do that, we cannot ask for green products. If we pushed for green procurement, scope 3 will be solved, which is scope 1 and 2 of everyone. Thank you very much.
Very forcefully put, but it's the point is very simple. Adopt the best available technologies now, quickly, as a priority. It's a question of prioritization. And I think everyone can agree that's very simple. And Once you've done that, you're going to reduce the amount of CO2 that you need to capture and transport, and it's a sensible prioritization, sequencing of where capital is allocated. So a really interesting discussion. And I think the last point briefly made, but it's really important, is public procurement. So, without the pull from the public sector, we're not, and from the whole of society, we're not going to get the momentum going and the movement we need. So thank you very much for the presentation. We'll take questions at the end if we have time. But now I'd like to move on to our next speaker or speakers. We're going to